Any opposed? Okay. And at this point, before we get going any further, I will have a roll call.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Carroll, Senator Douglas,
Present.
Senator Neal, Senator Nemes,
Present.
Senator Thomas, Representative Blanton, Representative Burke,
Here.
Representative Fleming,
Present.
Representative Lockett,
Present.
Representative Riley,
Here.
Representative Sharp,
Present.
Representative Stevenson,
Present.
Representative Petrie, Vice Chair Howell, Co-Chair Storm, and Co-Chair Bowling.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And members, please take note that there were some additional requests for the Department of Community-Based Services in last month's meeting. Those responses have been provided. They are in the folder. So take note of those, please. And we'll get going with our staff report on executive branch use of artificial intelligence systems. We've got Mr. Shane Stevens and Mr. Joel Thomas at the table. Gentlemen, please introduce yourselves for the record, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Shane Stevens. This is Joel Thomas, and we are presenting the findings of our LOIC staff report on the use of artificial intelligence by Kentucky's executive branch. The study resulted in 11 major findings, 6 agency recommendations, and 4 matters for legislative consideration. I'm going to summarize these briefly, and then we'll get into the details of the report. So our main objective for this report was to provide the committee with an analysis of how Kentucky's executive branch agencies are currently using AI. And to do this, we looked at how Kentucky is using, governing, and defining AI, and attempted to identify gaps where we think it can improve. Broadly speaking, AI systems are systems that can do many of the things that we used to think only humans could do, but can do it on its own and without our oversight. The work of more sophisticated AI models has become almost indistinguishable from human output, and all indications are that these systems are going to start having a significant impact on state governments by improving their operations, but also creating new risks. This has led to federal policymakers and research organizations like the National Institute for Standards and Technology and the Government Accountability Office, creating guidance to assist governments with AI policy and for governments to respond with statutory and regulatory oversight. Closer? Okay. In 2024 alone, 31 states passed AI legislation. Despite this trend towards AI governance, we found that Kentucky currently lacks any general statewide governments specifically for AI and does not maintain an active inventory of AI systems. The Commonwealth Office of Technology is likely the most applicable agency for this oversight, but currently oversees AI in the same way it does traditional IT systems. We identified one executive branch cabinet that has created AI-specific governance, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, which published a policy in 2024 that we found to be well aligned with federal standards and potentially a good model for other agencies to follow. Given that Kentucky's executive branch agencies are going to be increasingly reliant on AI systems, we recommend that Kentucky take steps now to develop policies to govern and manage them. Specifically, we recommend defining for the state what qualifies as an AI system, defining policies and procedures for the procurement, usage, and training of AI systems, and inventorying the systems currently in use. In regard to the inventory process, we believe it to be a necessary requirement for Kentucky's executive branch to keep better track of AI systems and an essential step for the creation of any policy. For us, it was necessary to create an inventory to be able to provide the information that we produced in this report. So in the absence of a pre-existing inventory, we worked with the Commonwealth Office of Technology to create a preliminary one. It identified 38 AI systems used for a wide range of tasks, with agencies reporting having the capability to audit the capabilities of half of the systems. So we broke down AI policy framework into 3 stages: understanding AI, governing AI, and managing AI. Practically, this means creating statutory and regulatory definitions to create a shared understanding for what we mean by AI, developing procurement, implementation, and usage policies to govern how we use AI, and developing ongoing oversight procedures to manage the systems once they've been implemented in state government. We found a great deal of confusion at the federal and state level on what even defines AI. So we make a number of recommendations about how to define it. The technology is complex and it has heavy overlap with non-AI systems. This makes it very difficult to draw a bright line between the two. The technology is also constantly evolving and has been integrated into a wide range of systems. This has created confusion for governments. In the past 5 years, the federal government has drafted 7 different definitions for AI systems, and states have drafted statutory definitions that vary to different degrees. Meanwhile, Kentucky has no consensus definition for AI systems. When we surveyed and inventoried Kentucky executive branch agencies, we found that cabinets use different criteria to define and catalog AI systems. Given this confusion, we recommend that the state develop a consensus definition for AI, and based on industry and policy standards, we derived a technical definition from 7 core characteristics. These include being machine-based, designed to simulate human intelligence, the capability of operating autonomously, and the ability to make observations and decisions over time. It also includes the ability to learn and improve, and the capability to handle tasks that typically have required human intelligence. So our first recommendation is that the Commonwealth Office of Technology adopt a similar definition for AI that can be applied across the state, and that the legislature consider establishing a definition for AI in statute. We recommend that these definitions be aligned with the National Institute for Standards and Technology. Once a definition is in place, AI governance typically focuses on the policies and procedures that are needed to oversee procurement, implementation, and usage. Kentucky's executive branch currently lacks statewide policies in these areas that are specific to AI, and we believe they will need to develop these policies and integrate AI policy into their existing information technology policies. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services has recently drafted an AI governance framework, which we found to be well aligned with leading standards and could be a good model for other agencies. This table shows the federal guidance from the National Institute for Standards and Technology and the Government Accountability Office on 5 areas which we are going to have recommendations for Kentucky with AI governance. I'll quickly go over each, starting with procurement. The procurement of AI systems involves different risks than traditional AI systems, and therefore should have different safeguards. Federal policymakers have created AI procurements guidance, emphasizing vendor transparency, agency audit capability, ethical procurement processes, and specialized risk assessment, which we believe can be implemented in Kentucky's AI procurement procedures. As it stands, COT handles AI procurement as it does IT procurement, but as in other categories, CHFS has additional procurement procedures that we think could be good for COT as well. Among other things, they've put into place additional vendor requirements and created an internal oversight committee to monitor AI procurements. Beyond serving as an opportunity to assess AI risk, the procurement process is also the primary opportunity to identify AI opportunities. LOIC staff surveyed each of Kentucky's executive branch cabinet IT leads, and they reported that their agencies have not yet invested heavily in AI. Despite the current lack of usage, agency reported that they anticipate greater use of AI in the future and identified a wide range of potential applications of the technology. This ranged from delivering better services to citizens to improving highway safety, and nearly all IT cabinet leads believe that AI can improve their cabinet's productivity and efficiency. Overall, cabinet IT leads reported 23 areas in which they believe AI could improve their operations. Given that IT leads report cabinets are not using much AI, but also see many ways in which AI can improve their performance, we recommend that COT and agencies work together to realize these opportunities. Recommendation 3.1 is that COT produce a report evaluating their procurement procedures, and how they can be improved and better aligned with national standards. We also recommend that COT work with executive branch agencies to produce a report evaluating the opportunities where agencies can improve their performance with AI systems. According to AI policy leaders and industry experts, the implementation of AI resources has the ability to greatly enhance government operations. By automating routine tasks, the National Institute for Standards and Technology found that the introduction of AI systems has increased the efficiency and reduced the operational costs of several federal agencies. But this also carries with it risks, specifically the need for consistent human oversight, the disclosure of AI use, and additional data security designed to combat AI-specific vulnerabilities. Currently, Kentucky's executive branch does not have a statewide AI usage policy. LOIC staff surveyed executive branch IT leads and found that Kentucky agencies are using AI currently for a variety of purposes. We requested information from 9 cabinets, and they reported using a total of 38 systems. The most common applications focused on document management, automation, customer service delivery, marketing, media creation, and data analysis. In addition, several agencies reported using AI systems for cabinet-specific needs like risk management, digital asset management, and workforce training. Given that agencies are already incorporating AI systems into their operations, we recommend that COT establish AI-specific governance policies aligned with national standards and report them to select legislative committees. We also recommend that the legislature consider revising KRS 42726 to require that COT do so. Once AI systems are procured and put into use, it is important also to provide users with appropriate training. LOIC staff surveys found that state CIOs found the improper use of AI and inadequate training were among their most chief concerns. These concerns were echoed by Kentucky executive branch IT leads, with over half of cabinet leads reporting concern. Kentucky currently has no statewide guidance on training of AI systems, but CHFS's AI training guidance and federal frameworks could serve as a model. Recommendation 3.3 is that given that state officials from multiple cabinets report concerns and have no guidance for them with the use of AI, we recommend that COT develop workforce training guidance for the executive branch. That covers the recommendations related to understanding and implementing AI, and Joel's going to go over our recommendations for the ongoing management of these systems.
So AI systems in government carry unique risks beyond those of traditional technology, such as amplifying biases, privacy and security vulnerabilities, and other issues that can complicate accountability. To mitigate these, AI risk assessments are crucial for responsible, safe, and ethical AI use, ensuring reliability, transparency, and human oversight, especially in public welfare areas. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework guides governments in addressing AI risks, focusing on bias, security, transparency, accountability, and workforce readiness. This framework stresses governance, accountability, and staff training to uphold ethics and build trust in AI government applications. Executive branch agencies in Kentucky have expressed concerns about various AI-related risks. IT leaders from these agencies were surveyed to identify the risks they found most pressing regarding AI use. The top concerns reported were data security and privacy, workforce vulnerabilities, and fairness and bias. Of the 9 cabinets surveyed, 8 cited data security and privacy as a major risk. 5 emphasized the need for more workforce training, and 4 flagged fairness and bias as significant issues. Additional concerns raised by agencies included AI system accountability and reliability, the absence of state regulations, challenges in AI implementation, and the cost of these systems. COT currently lacks a formal risk assessment policy for AI tools and systems. However, it is in the early phases of developing and integrating AI tools into its existing infrastructure. Establishing an AI risk assessment strategy and corresponding policy should be a priority for COT. Given the unique risks associated with AI deployment, we recommend that COT develop a risk assessment that is aligned with the best practices for AI systems in use by executive branch agencies. COT should post the methodology for its risk assessment on its website and send copies to LOIC, the LRC, and the Interim Joint Committee on Tourism, Small Business, and Information Technology by October 1st of next year. Inventories of AI systems are recommended by both NIST and the GAO, including specific use cases to better understand and manage AI capabilities. Federal mandates and some states now require such inventories. At the federal level, 3 separate mandates require agencies to submit AI system and use case inventories, with the first due to the Office of Management and Budget by December of this year. Several states have recently implemented mandates to inventory and oversee AI systems used by their executive branch agencies. Among these states, California and Texas are currently conducting AI inventories that will be submitted to legislative committees by the end of the year. These inventories gather detailed data on AI systems, including use cases, risk assessments, and auditability. Some states, such as Indiana, Maryland, and West Virginia, have an AI inventory deadline set for next year. Currently, Kentucky does not have a statewide inventory of AI systems. However, LOIC, with the help from COT, produced a preliminary inventory for this report. In the absence of a pre-existing AI systems inventory, LOIC staff worked with COT and agency IT leads to compile one. We requested information on all IT systems that used AI techniques and could be considered AI systems. The following is an example of one of the 38 AI applications we inventoried from 9 responsive cabinets. As you can see on the slide, the inventory collected information on the application's name, its general AI classification, which agency uses the application's developer, the agency use, and whether the cabinet or COT can audit the application. This particular AI system, called AWS Connect and developed by Amazon, is used by the Education and Labor Cabinet's Office of Unemployment Insurance. AWS uses machine learning and generative AI to answer unemployment claimant questions. The application can also analyze customer sentiment and review interactions with unemployment insurance agents, as well as create and analyze phone call transcripts. Given that an inventory is considered essential to the process of creating policies to govern and manage AI systems, we recommend that COT conduct an annual AI systems inventory. By October 1st of 2025 and annually thereafter, COT should post this inventory on its website and provide copies to LOIC LRC, and the Interim Joint Committee on Tourism, Small Business, and Information Technology. We also ask that the General Assembly consider revising the relevant statute to include among COT's roles, duties, and permissible activities the requirement to conduct an annual inventory of artificial intelligence systems in use by any state agency. Kentucky does not maintain an inventory of general IT applications or systems used by applications. That said, the same advantages of maintaining an inventory of AI systems should also apply to AI or to IT systems generally. Conducting an inventory of all IT assets would include AI systems, thereby accomplishing the goals of the previous recommendations. Although COT does not currently maintain an IT inventory, creating such an inventory would be a considerably larger task than just creating an inventory for AI systems. Staff also note that findings related to general IT governance are outside the scope of this study. Therefore, this report recommends that COT conduct its own feasibility study that explores the value of an inventory covering all executive branch IT applications used by state agencies and report its findings to legislative committees by October of next year. So based on the previous recommendation to include a feasibility study to explore the benefits of a broader IT inventory, the General Assembly may wish to consider revising statute to include the requirement and authority for COT to conduct an annual inventory of all technology systems in use by executive branch agencies. Similarly, based on the results of both the AI system inventory and the general IT inventory feasibility study, the General Assembly may wish to revise statute to require all executive branch agencies to annually submit an inventory of IT systems to COT. So in closing, we'll have a few key takeaways here. AI is having a major impact on society generally, but not on Kentucky government just yet. We believe this is likely to change, and so Kentucky's lack of statewide AI governance should be addressed. This report presents recommendations and matters for legislative consideration to begin the process, which we have modeled on federal and state government frameworks and guidance. The report also begins this process by providing a preliminary inventory of AI systems currently in use. I would also like to say that Kentucky is not really behind in its AI governance implementation. Other states are in the same boat as us. There are a few states that are out in front, but generally speaking, Kentucky is not behind. So at this point, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question from Senator Thomas.
First of all, I want to begin by complimenting all of us. We had the foresight during our 2024 legislative session to say that, look, we need to really begin to dig deep into AI as a legislative body. There were several bills filed in the area of AI. I know I filed a couple myself. And I really applaud the legislature for saying that we really need to get a handle on this. Of course, we have formed a task force this session to look into this. And I know several other committees have looked into this. Health Services looked into this. I know the Judiciary has looked into this. I know that we're looking into this. So I really think we're doing a good service to the people of Kentucky in this area. And of course, I'm going to say more about that later on this weekend. I do have 3 questions for you, though, as way of starting the discussion. Number one, you had mentioned that there were, and I couldn't get them, was it 29 or 34? But I want to go back to your very first statements and ask the question: how many states have enacted some legislative policy related to the use of AI?
In 2024, 31 states alone, just in that year, passed legislation. And we could get a grand total of all, like we could say for like the last 5 years or so, if you would.
Well, no, I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
Were we one of those 31 states?
That passed legislation in 24.
Yes.
I'd have to check. I don't know for sure.
Okay. Well, I guess, Mr. Chair, my first ask would be that can you get Chairman Bowling a list of those 31 states? And also, if you could get that to Chairperson Amanda Mays Bledsoe and to Representative Josh Bray, Chairman Josh Bray, because they had the AI task force here. I think they would like to know what states have passed some kind of policy related to AI. Is that a fair ask, Mr. Chair?
Fair ask.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. Number 2, you propose that a definition be adopted. You recommend a definition be adopted on AI as to what AI is. Mr. Chair, we don't really have a lot of dialogue among committees, but I'm going to make this ask, and we can debate this. Since you have really analyzed this in a way that's really important to the state, because what you're doing is really a state service to people of Kentucky, I would ask that you take the lead in recommending drafting a definition that we as legislators can look at and send that definition to this committee, because we are the Legislative Oversight and Investigations Committee, and send that draft definition again to Chairwoman Amanda Mays Bledsoe and to Representative Josh Bray, since they had the task force. And that would be, in other words, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I mean, as a individual generally, I think as leadership, if something's already been created, then let's start there and then look at it and see if it needs to be tweaked or improved. And you have, again, really analyzed this very well. So why don't you start by giving us a draft definition that we can look at, and then maybe we might want to tweak or modify it. Okay, is that a fair ask, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and then my third question. Which is, you've enumerated a lot of sound recommendations regarding to what we should do as legislators in 2025, to again begin to get a handle on what the executive branch is doing in the area of AI. They're all sound, and I don't have a problem with any of them. I want to be clear on that. I don't have a problem with any of them. But I think since we're looking at this, we should not limit our analysis just to what the executive branch is doing in the use of AI. I'm an attorney, okay? And I would like to know what the judiciary is doing as well. And maybe look at what we could do to draft, at least get an inventory on how the judiciary is doing AI. Are judges now, using AI to implement their rulings, rather than using their own intellect? I mean, I like to know that as an attorney. Of what is the Supreme Court doing with the use of AI? So, and of course the legislature as well. Are we using AI to draft bills, as opposed to having our staff do it from their own intellect? So I think as we go forward in this, and I won't ask the chairman this, but I think we ought to look at what the other branches of government are doing, not just the executive, but what the legislature is doing and what the judiciary is doing in the area of AI. Okay, so those are my 3 points, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Thomas. And you're exactly right. There is great interest on this from the legislative's point of view. We got this process started on this study late last year, I believe. And since then, there's been it was decided that there's a special committee set up, the AI task force for this. I know that several of you sit on that committee, so there is great interest, and it's something that it is being looked at, needs to continue to be looked at. So, but at this point, I don't see any other questions on this topic or for these presenters. Thank you all for your work on this.
Thank you.
And at this time, we'll have the representatives of the Commonwealth Office of Technology, the Chief Information Officer, Miss Ruth Day, and General Counsel, Mr. Robert Long. If you all will make your way to the table. And once you get settled, if you will, just please introduce yourselves for the record. And I do appreciate you all being here today. As has been mentioned, there is a lot of interest in this. It's a ever-evolving subject that I think everyone's trying to wrap their heads around and figure out what are the best ways forward in this area. And I appreciate y'all being here and being part of this conversation today.
Thank you. My name is Ruth Day, and I'm the Executive Director of the Commonwealth Office of Technology and the CIO. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment on our responses to the recommendations regarding executive branch use of artificial intelligence.
And my name's Robert Long. I'm General Counsel for Finance and Administration Cabinet.
And I'd also like to thank Shane Stevens, Will Spears, and Joel Thomas for their soliciting our input in their research and for their thoughtful questions.
Yes, and I will.
I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, go ahead. And I will point committee members, there is no slide presentation on this, but the office's responses to all the recommendations are in your packet, so those are available to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you. So since I have just prepared a summary statement from those responses. They, in fact, have shared their 12 recommendations, and COT has provided the specific responses to the recommendations, but in general, COT does not have any concerns with the recommendations. COT is evaluating the governance to publish around AI. AI is a very broad topic, and we want to provide meaningful guidance, which we do through policies. And in the case of AI, we are starting with generative AI. We believe many of the concerns expressed about AI regarding privacy and protecting data are addressed in existing policies. But given the publicly available Gen AI, we put out guidance in a way of training as part of our annual employee training process. COT believes that the CIO has the authority to issue any such policies as it does on other IT-related matters, and so does not believe it needs administrative regulation. Part of the CIO authority is the duty to approve technology acquisitions prior to any procurement, and so COT has policies and procedures for agencies to follow for IT procurement and implementation. And as an IT tool, AI acquisition will come under COT policies as well. COT requires security training for executive branch employees and will expand that required training as needed by AI. COT strives to identify opportunities in the marketplace to improve the effectiveness of state government operations to better serve the citizens, and AI will be no different. Developing a coordinated security framework and model governance structure for state executive branch agencies, including the development of methods of conducting risk assessment of IT systems in use by the executive branch agencies based upon the NIST risk management framework, are core parts of COT's statutory mission. Conducting a risk assessment in the AI systems falls directly within that mission. COT has an inventory of approved licensed products it maintains in a library we call KITS, Kentucky Information Technology Standards. And instead of conducting an annual inventory, we believe, as the agencies do, that we have grown to the point that we need to procure and deploy an application portfolio management system that would maintain the information recommended and track changes in real time, adding value beyond an inventory.
And if I could just add a couple of small comments, I would point out that KRS 42726, 728, and 730 provide really broad powers of the COT and to the CIO day in governing the IT infrastructure for the executive branch. It also puts in a strict requirement for the other agencies to assist and comply with the CIO in deployment of that. So at this point, we think the statute is in fact broad enough for COT to issue its governance and do so as it does with current technology systems through its issuance of CIO policies that are posted on its website and are enforced against agencies, and through its strict procurement rules and its involvement in the procurement of all technology-based procurements.
Okay, understood. Do you all see the value? Understand that it's broad enough. You all believe it's broad enough right now that you're able to do your jobs and handle AI and where it is now, where it may be going. But do you all see value in better defining some of these things so that everyone knows kind of the rules of the road before certain investments are made, other than, depending on who is in the Office of Technology and who is the Chief Information Officer at the state, that those policies could change drastically if those certain persons change.
In our current experience, we feel like the policies that are issued from the CIO is an adequate process. Now, I will say that, again, in COT's role, what we do is provide a baseline of a policy. And then the agencies can adopt their own policies that might be more stringent or restrictive or directive, because they have other issues or other needs or other agencies, maybe federal agencies that oversee what they do. So we feel like we've had good experience with policies and issuing policies and having them followed.
And if I could add, I would say that the COT has worked with industry leaders and has developed a draft AI policy that is being reviewed by the leadership in the executive branch. And it's taken a little time because, again, rather than being a agency specific or a business use, it's attempting to be a very broad guidance kind of document that would be generally applicable to every potential use. And so we do anticipate that it will be issued shortly, but that is a process that is ongoing. To your question specifically about defining things, I'm not sure that we're necessarily resistant to some broad definitions, but I think we would ask that the legislature be kind of cautious about being too restrictive or trying to preclude or take away the flexibility of the CIO day to adapt to ever-changing situations. As the presentation earlier noted, I think the federal government has adopted, I think they identified 7 different definitions. So you can see that it's rapidly changing all the time. And so not necessarily resistant, but the legislature should be a little bit cautious that legislative requirements or strict definitions can sometimes, they're not easily changeable. They don't change overnight, and they're not as easy to maneuver. So we want to ensure that flexibility for the CIO and COT is preserved to make sure that they can adequately safeguard the IT infrastructure.
What about the possibility of some reporting requirements of the work that's going on, not just on AI, but in the office in general, so that us in the legislature or other branches of government have a better idea of, okay, this is what is currently going on, and as that changes, as that evolves throughout this process, because I think we all understand this is a new technology. It's changing very rapidly, and I don't think anyone up here wants to handcuff anybody and put our state in a detrimental situation with that. However, I do feel like more transparency and an ongoing conversation would serve us all very well.
Well, it is very early in the process, and I would certainly agree with you. Transparency would be very important, and I think we would continue to look at that as we go forward. We are very early stages.
And I will say that one of our recommendations to staff's recommendations about an inventory, if COT was granted the ability or the funding necessary to procure, implement, and deploy a application management portfolio system, that would really be a way in which COT could capture the data that the staff has recommended that it capture and report to you, but it could capture it in a day-to-day, real-time mechanism and then generate reports annually or on a as-needed basis, because specifically to provide more of that transparency. So we really think that would be, I mean, asking for a survey and taking an inventory is one thing, and not necessarily opposed to that, but I think the deployment of this application portfolio management system that COT has recommended would be provide greater resources and more information quicker to both COT and legislators.
Very good. I believe Senator Thomas has a question.
Ms. Dan, I'm going to direct this question to you, and it's really more of a comment or consideration than a question. We just had our last AI meeting this week, the most recent one, and we had Dr. Roman Yaplinski. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correct. You were there at the meeting.
Yes, sir.
So you heard what he said, and I just want to share what he said to members of this committee. Dr. Yaplinski, who really was the one who got us all started with considering AI when he spoke to us in June of last year, indicated, Mr. Dan, you heard him, that in a period of about 4 to 5 years, AI will have the power of all the human brains in this world. Okay, and that was a sobering comment that he said. So, while we're not, it's still early in the process to try to get some definitions and some understanding of AI. If we wait too much longer, it'll be too late. So there's this fine line now where we really have to get started moving in terms of what we're going to do. And that's not just Kentucky. It's all states and it's Congress as well. Need to get some handle on how we're going to regulate AI. And I don't mean that in a restrictive manner, but I mean that in a smart manner, so that it doesn't get to the point where we can't control it. I think that was Dr. Yaplinski's point, that the time to start moving on this is now.
I would say his message was very powerful, and I would just reassure this committee that there's not a day that doesn't go by that at COT we are not talking about and trying to develop knowledge and use cases and be aware of what is moving in the marketplace relative to AI.
And if I could add just one other thing, I would just to clarify for the committee that all IT technology procurements, any of those that would include everything that encompasses AI. When an agency wants to pursue those, they have to consult with COT. COT imposes requirements and restrictions in that RFP process, and then will ultimately work with the agency in the ultimate procurement to ensure that it is safe to deploy on the enterprise. And then once those systems are used, if they're going to modify that IT contract, a strategic procurement request must be submitted that is also subject to review by COT to ensure that any modifications continue to meet the IT standards set by COT before it can be implemented and deployed. So there are safeguards that are currently being used in the procurement of all IT systems, including AI, and like CIO Day just said, I mean, they're continually trying to improve that, and we definitely want to work with this committee and the legislature to continue that improvement. But we want to also reassure that this is not something that's sneaking up on COT, something they are actively working on all the time.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you all for the responses. We do have one more question, but before we get to that question, I believe some members may need to peel out a little early today. So at this point in time, I will ask for a motion to adopt this report. Second. Got a motion and a second, and we will need a roll call on this.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Carroll,
Aye.
Senator Douglas,
Aye.
Senator Neal, Senator Nemus, Senator Thomas, Representative Blanton, Representative Burke,
Aye.
Representative Fleming, Representative Lockett,
Aye.
Representative Riley, Representative Sharp,
Aye.
Representative Stevenson, Representative Petrie, Vice Chair Howell, Co-Chair Storm, and Co-Chair Bowling.
Yes.
Thank you.
The report is adopted. Thank you very much. And we've got a question from Senator Carroll, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. And I want to qualify my question. I am absolutely no expert in any way, shape, form, or fashion with this. But and please forgive me if this question does not really make good sense. But President Stivers is always talking about before we can address it, we have to know what it is. When in this case, we have to know what AI is before we can regulate it. And are we far enough along in this new technology to really understand what the pitfalls might be, or what parameters we need to set on what as it relates to state government, as it relates to everything that we deal with in each branch, for that matter? So are we to the point that we can even think about how to regulate it? Do we know enough about what it is yet?
Well, to your point, AI has been around for a long time, and I think what mostly people are discussing and what has hit the news so much is generative AI. And so we are really trying to focus on that. And I can speak from the actual use case of generative AI. There will be broad use cases for generative AI in the executive branch. That's where we're focused right now. So trying to understand AI in total, I think, is a really big question. And I'm not sure there's really anybody. There are probably a handful of experts maybe in the country that really understand it from A to Z. So we're all kind of on a learning process.
Most of what I have seen and what I have dealt with is just a matter of it being like a different level of checking grammar when you're preparing a document, in that sense. And that's really the only experience I've had with it. My son has talked about being able to do a resume where he just puts the information in and it spits out a perfect product. And so that's how I view it. And I know it involves a lot more than that, but, so I'm not really sure we know what the boundaries are to really, and that may be the whole point of the comments, is we need to get in front of it and we need to have a good understanding of it before it goes that far, where we really get to a point where there could be some serious pitfalls in where AI is and the proper use of it throughout daily activities. And I hope that makes sense. But
it does. And operationally, we will be in front of it. We will know the applications and the tools and how they work before we will put them in production.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And we've got 2 more questions on the list. We're going to do questions for about another 5 minutes, and that way we'll give ourselves enough time for the next topic. But thank you all. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you for what you do. I have a question based on the gentleman whose name I don't want to mess up that spoke in June. He actually said 3 to 5 years, game over if we don't get ahead of this. And it was startling that he implied that the bad guys are further ahead than we are. So my question is, given that sense of urgency, do we have anybody that wakes up every day and do we have a strategy of how to get this on the right path? That we know it's going to change, but instead of every morning just waking up and doing stuff, are we following any plan that will have us arrive at the place we think we want to be before game is over?
I believe he was referring to what they call super artificial intelligence, which is really a very limited number of corporations that are doing that kind of work today. and it requires a massive amount of energy and resources to do that. And so I think as a society, we all have to keep our eye on it. I certainly agree with you, Representative.
Do we have I am not the technology queen that I think I am. I throw computers. But do we have, I just want to go home and sleep tonight knowing that there's someone in your office that's an expert and gets up every day, all day, coming up with strategies and plans so that we can do that for the Kentucky people.
Yes, ma'am, I can assure you that we work on this every day.
And we have a very diligent chief security officer at COT who I personally get to work with on occasion, and he is excellent. That is constantly working to ensure the safety of our information that is deployed on our network and the protection of that network.
And the last thing is simply, I see from everything we've been studying on the two committees that this is not business as usual. This is the atomic bomb of the internet. Like, this is so different. This is going to change life as we know it. And it reserves, like the senators have said, all that you're doing. So thank you.
Well, now I'm not going to sleep well, but thank you for those comments and questions there. Last question on this subject, on this topic, Senator Douglas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start out by saying she was right in that number one, in the professional space, the bad guys are always ahead. We just don't want to talk about it, but we know they are. We spend a lot of time keeping up. My question really is, if you would just, in a short period of time, give us some guidance about how we should set up the guardrails. Because there is a train of thought that we need to have wide guardrails so we can encompass as much as we can, gain as much knowledge as we can. However, sometimes when you let the cat out of the bag, you can't get them back in the bag. So could you give us a little bit of your thought on how wide that trail needs to be in terms of what we're willing to either take a look up front, and then once we know more, we can expand, or whether we expand and then say, okay, now we got to back off, which is almost impossible.
Well, I would say the advice that we ought to all be watching how it develops is good advice that has been discussed in this group today. What we focus on in the executive branch is really very narrow in using these tools and very specific use cases to try to replace mundane work and try to make staff available to deal with more complex issues. So what we're doing is not what you heard in the AI task force about the actual mining and working through the piles of data. That's really would not be our use case here in the Commonwealth, and I don't see that in any near future. We'll be using very narrow usage tools.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Douglas. And again, thank you all for being here today. Thank you for this conversation. Also to the committee, the staff, the analysts that worked on this. Thank you all. Thank you, Shane and Joel. And I appreciate you all being here today.
Thank you. And I would echo that we really did appreciate working with the staffers. They were great.
Great. Thank you. At this point, we will have Danielle Clore, the CEO of the Kentucky Nonprofit Network, and Representative Sean McPherson, District 22. They will make their way to the table. Please introduce yourselves for the record, and the floor is yours. Use the mic there.
The middle. There we go. Danielle Clore, CEO of Kentucky Nonprofit Network.
Thank you very much.
Get you set up for a slide here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, let's see here. Do you have it on like?
It's PDF.
Oh, it's a PDF.
So I can do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Great. Good afternoon, and thank you for Co-Chair Bowling for not forgetting of our request to bring this in front of the committee almost a year ago and to committee members. Again, my name is Danielle Clore, and I'm the CEO of Kentucky Nonprofit Network. We're the state association of charitable nonprofits here in Kentucky, 501c3. I'm going to explain a little bit about why that matters. And we serve organizations of all missions and sizes all across the Commonwealth. We have about 1,100 members across the state, but come in contact with about 7,000 organizations. So I do want to, you've got a packet, so I'm not going to go through this data, but wanted you to have the context of the size and scope of Kentucky's nonprofits and their importance as employers as well as to workforce participation here in the Commonwealth. So we've got a lot of organizations, but those are all tax exempts. What we're really focusing on are the charitable C3 nonprofits, and there are a little over 13,000 of those in Kentucky. And again, those are the ones that we focus on at Kentucky Nonprofit Network. So to make sure you understand the difference of that, C3 charitable nonprofits means donations to them are tax deductible, and in exchange for that, we cannot endorse candidates or parties. So that is the trade-off between charitable nonprofits and how we're different from many of the others that you hear from. I always like to do a little bit of quick coverage with legislators. Nonprofits are businesses, and we are unique businesses. And so that is important for our discussion today, because when you look at this, what I want you to be able to see on the bottom there is when nonprofits have profit, and they should, even though we are called nonprofits, that money must be, that income must be reinvested in our mission. So unlike a for-profit where we divide that money up among our shareholders, we do not have that luxury. So we are investing right back into the services and the community that we provide. K&N provides a lot of benefits. Ultimately, we're trying to save nonprofits time and money so they can focus on their mission. And then many of you, of course, see us here in Frankfort because we are lobbying and advocating on behalf of our sector at the federal, state, and now local level, primarily because of opportunities proposed or that were available through the American Rescue Plan Act and local opioid abatement funds. All right, so a couple of data points I want to be sure you know about is that nonprofits in Kentucky employ 1 in 10 people. We are the 4th largest private sector employer. So we're important for the workforce from that perspective, certainly. Over 160,000 jobs in Kentucky and billions of dollars in annual wages and in money going right back to the economy. And certainly every Kentuckian is impacted by a nonprofit, whether they know it or not. So the other piece that I think is really important is that we are important as employers, but we are important for the workforce generally. Nonprofits are there for job readiness and training, care responsibility, child care, elder care, transportation. All of the things that impact workforce participation are typically run through or provided by charitable nonprofits. So that's an important piece of that. Also wanted to thank the General Assembly. You all have provided incredible support to Kentucky's nonprofit sector, most recently in addressing an unintended consequence of sales tax reform on nonprofit fundraising. Certainly access to the state's grant program in 2023 was important. And then most notably, the $75 million appropriation of the state's American Rescue Plan Act funds in 2022. Over 1,100 nonprofits across the state were able to access those funds. Also, your support last year, and we'll be digging in more on, especially in the House, House Bill 777 with Representative McPherson around what we're going to be talking about today, contracts and those kinds of things, what are impacting nonprofits. So we're very grateful to have the unanimous support of the House, and we are eager to get this bill back in front of the General Assembly for 2026. And also want to be sure to shout out the Nonprofit Caucus. About half of this committee, I think, are members. But if you're not, I know Christy Glass would love to get you signed up, and we'll have you championing this work. So to give that context, what we really want to dig in on today is that state contracting and payment practices are fueling a nonprofit workforce shortage and threatening the services of Kentucky. So what we wanted to do in talking with this committee when we met with Chairman Bowling in, I guess, January or February of last year was really try to get some data and research and understand why is this happening, and as we look to solutions, are those working and being effective? So that is our hope today, and that we pique your interest enough to do just that. So we also want to point out that we are in ongoing communication with the Finance and Administration Cabinet. They have been very helpful. They want to solve this problem, I don't know as much as we do, but almost, if not as much. And so we're going to continue to work with them, and are very, very grateful for their support. I think it was beautiful. You said earlier, Chairman Bowling, that as staff and administrations change, policies change. That is exactly the reason we are looking to the General Assembly for support on this, because we want to be sure that there are things that are in law and in statute in Kentucky that can protect nonprofits from this problem for years to come. Unfortunately, what I'm about to share with you is not unique to Kentucky. It is plaguing every state. It is plaguing grants and contracts at the federal level as well as the local level. But I think what's exciting is we in Kentucky can be a leader and a model for how to fix this problem. So we're really encouraged by that. So when I talk to you about the workforce shortage, we've got Kentucky results. Nonprofits, 78% reported having staffing vacancies. 42% of those had vacancies of 20% or higher. The key number here is 70% of those vacancies were frontline staff. So what that means are waiting lists. So when you look down there, 65% of nonprofits report waiting lists for services. Over 50% of that is a month or more. What that means is your constituents are not getting access to the services that they need, and that is a problem. So why does government even work with nonprofits? Well, because we believe that we can do it more affordably, more effectively, and more collaboratively than government. We can leverage other funds, and we do provide services, many times mandatory, statutorily required services on behalf of government. And government also looks to nonprofits because you value things like health, including mental health, housing, childcare, and again, so much more that gets folks working and engaging in society. So, you know, you may think, well, this is easy. Nonprofits just apply for the money or get a contract, and what's the big deal? There are a lot of barriers. One is, what are the available grants and contracts that are available to nonprofits? They may not have the expertise to write it. A lot of times they require matching funds. Again, House Bill 9 in 2023 helped address that barrier. A lot of times there are cash flow issues, and we're going to really dig into how that is being impacted here. They may not have the expertise with regard to some of the reporting requirements. And then there are issues around late agreements, late payments, uncertainty, and the funding not covering the full cost of services, which is a significant problem. So ultimately, we've got grants and contracts that are hurting nonprofits' ability to serve Kentucky communities, and I want to walk you through what this looks like. So when government grants and contracts don't cover the full cost, the agreements aren't executed before the services are slated to begin. So they may supposed to start July 1, but we don't get an agreement until September. We've got a problem. The invoices are not being paid on time. Ultimately, that means nonprofits are floating government also to wait to receive their reimbursement. So what this means for them is they can't hire and retain staff. They're unable to make payroll without taking out costly lines of credit or loans if they can get them. And they are faced with destabilized operations and an unsustainable business model. Why this really matters to Kentuckians is we've got wait lists for services, closed programs, and your constituents cannot access what they need for self-sufficiency, workforce participation, and quite frankly, community safety. So one of our members shared with us late payments are putting our organization in an impossible position. We've exhausted our cash reserves. With the decline in donations, we can no longer float the state. And even if we could, we shouldn't have to. Another person saying that it can take sometimes up to a year while they wait for a contract modification to be improved. And they're just in limbo for a year in providing those services. So during the last legislative session, we were delighted to work with Representative Sean McPherson on House Bill 777 that created a framework for efficient government. So that legislation may be tweaked based on our ongoing work with the Finance and Administration Cabinet, but essentially it streamlined definitions to reduce confusion, required payments within 30 days of invoice submission, provided 1% a month or 12% per annum on late payments, and required the cabinet to create clear regs that address payments that make entities whole. So if I have to run out and get a line of credit while I float the state, do I get reimbursed for the expense of the interest that my organization has had to incur? And I can't stress enough, getting their rights in the agreements is critical. Some of these things were in statute, but no one knew. Organizations simply did not know. So this legislation, or a version of it in 2025, will help and ensure Kentucky pays its bills on time, creating foundational structural solutions for the state's payment process to ensure nonprofits can do what you all are contracting with us to do, and that's deliver services. Helps employers recruit and retain staff, helps ensure nonprofits can pay vendors on time, which again impacts our entire economy, helps Kentucky maximize and leverage federal funds, because we're trying to bring those dollars to Kentucky, and ultimately creates a community where Kentuckians can thrive. Our risk of inaction is potentially the state not meeting its legal obligations. As I mentioned, some of these services are statutorily mandated services, and if they can't be provided, that is problematic. Stymied workforce participation, certainly unsustainable cash flow impacting nonprofits, and of course all of the impacts to Kentuckians through closed programs and waiting lists, and ultimately it's increasing the costs to the state of Kentucky as well. So with that, I'm going to let Representative McPherson share with you his pitch for why this is so critically important.
Thank you, Representative Sean McPherson, 22nd District. You know, so I was asked to get involved with this, and I had a personal situation come up in my district to where we had a train depot situation that is no longer, it's an abandoned train depot, but it was where Dollar General first started right there, and we want to make it in Scottsville, the home of Dollar General there, a place where you can come and do some tourism. Well, I was contacted by one of my constituents last year before, in the summer of last year, and said, you know, we were granted a contract or a grant in 2019, and we still have not been able to lever that down. And I started working with them and pretty much got, I'm not going to say people weren't trying to work with me, but pretty stifled also. And so I understood the confusion of it. So I try our family businesses and a couple of my businesses, I try to run about 5 different businesses, and concise contracts, understanding is so important into figuring out what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, and when I'm going to get paid. And you're asking nonprofits, everybody understands, and when you hear the word nonprofit, I think when you go to try to bid a contract with a nonprofit, the first thing that's in people's minds is, well, they want me to do something for nothing. And that's not the case, but it's been somewhat the case because we don't honor the fact that we're going to take a contract and honor it on time. If you want to be able to bid in this day and time because of the lack of, we all know how flustered we are with the lack of workforce and the lack of availability of workers, and then add on to the fact that, well, we'd sure like for you to do it, but we don't know when we're going to get funded. You know, if it's important, this is the reason I took this on, if it's important enough to fund, it's important enough to finish. And the only way you can finish that is have a clear and concise contract. Now, some of these things about 30 days and this and that and another, you know, I'm not so worried about the finite of it. I want the framework. Each business, each industry will have industry standards. If industry standards say 45 days, I'm okay with changing any of that, but I want a framework that says when we sign this, we're going to perform. Performance-based is what I want. You know, the Transportation Cabinet called me and said, is this going to affect? No, I don't want it to affect you. Oh, you all know what you're doing. As long as you're doing what you're doing, then do it right and do it concise. But if we expect nonprofits to 10% of our workforce, and we're trying to get we got a workforce task force here, we're trying to figure out a basis of how we build this. A foundational part of this is to help our nonprofits that support all of that in the fact that if we give them a contract, if we give them a grant, then we fulfill that grant, that contract in a timely basis so that they can go out there and tell that central heat and air person, that plumber or that roofer or whatever it may be, when you get it done, we'll pay you. We're not expecting you to do this for nothing. And so that's the reason I took this on, is because I wanted the framework, and then as we worked through this last year, we put a reporting contract on it, just as you said, Chairman Bowling, a while ago. Everything needs a reporting contract, or a portion of that, so that we know, and if we've got one agency, maybe we've got 7 or 8 out here working on it, and we've got one that's not doing it, we can catch that kind of in a net, that they're the ones that's not doing it up to par, and we can get them up to level really quick without waiting till we get way deep in the woods or way deep in a hole and try to dig ourselves back out. So a reporting portion of this so that we know what's going on, and then just clear, concise contracts. House Bill 1, $2.8 billion that we've got out in this state right now. The biggest thing that I think we've got going on right now is how to get this money properly out and properly functioning in the state of Kentucky. And that's my spiel.
So what's next? So obviously, as you can tell, we are passionate that reforms are critical and foundational and immediately needed to address these practices. And to be clear, not every nonprofit in Kentucky has government grants and contracts with the state, the feds, or local government, but this impacts them all. The ripple effect is sector-wide for sure. So we are very eager to get working on this, and we want to continue working collaboratively with the Finance Administration Cabinet to determine what can be addressed via administrative regs, what must be addressed legislatively, and we just got some drafts from them yesterday, so we're very appreciative of their continued work with us on that. And I think back to the original task force. I think Senator Carroll was on that task force back in 2015, 2016. This is not a new issue, but we are optimistic that we're in a good place to pass it, and 2025 will hopefully be our year to get started. And we're eager, again, our goal with this committee is to continue to monitor the problems and the proposed solutions, and are we making progress on those so that we can be sure what we're doing is working. So with that, any questions at all for either of us?
Thank you all very much. I know first of all, you provide a great service to our state, and we're certainly appreciative of that. We also we know the work that you put in on this bill in particular, so that hopefully we can have a better framework, and so that there aren't delays for our nonprofits. And one or two quick questions is, if a contract comes on, say July 1st, is there an average amount of time when the contract's supposed to start to when those dollars are actually coming into the nonprofits?
I don't think there is the way we kind of look at it is, if you've seen one contractor agreement, you've seen one contractor agreement. I think it just seems like it varies by department and by cabinet and by staff person who's working on it, and then sometimes it varies by nonprofit and the source of funding. Are they those federal flow-through dollars, or are they state dollars? So there is not, but I think, and we want to be careful, because we want to be careful what we wish for. And on the one hand, you want uniformity, but then there are times where we are incredibly appreciative of the flexibility. But I think the issue is when you get that award, or it's being renewed, for example, you hear the great news. You want to go out, you want to hire, you want to get people, but if you don't get that agreement and don't get the money, you're floating that. And nonprofits do not have the access to capital to float that. So that is a challenge. And I think, and you saw, if there are any changes, goodness help you. It could be a year before, and can you float payroll while you're waiting for that change to occur? And if you can imagine, if any of you run or own a business, you're trying to tell your staff, don't worry, don't leave. It'll all work out. You hope, Yeah.
So what about some examples, best case scenario versus worst case scenario?
Of turnaround?
I know Sean, or Representative McPherson, had mentioned 4 years on the one that was brought to his attention, 4.5 years.
Right.
And I can imagine, I'm a business owner myself. If I'm supposed to be getting paid for something and 4.5 years later I'm sitting there waiting on it, I'm not going to be in the business very long.
If I could even speak to that, they decided, because the criteria had changed during that so much, that $200,000 wasn't even worth it. They gave it back and said, "We'll just do it ourselves." And that's a sad place to be, to say, I can't even take money that's been given to me and utilize it because we can't figure out a way to get it through the system properly. We've got to figure out this again, $2.8 billion that we just appropriated. We've got to figure out how to get this through the state system so it flows properly and we see return on investment.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the other piece that I want to be sure I mention is the deliverables on that grant or contract are typically due by June 30. So you may not be able, most nonprofit boards of directors would say, well, don't get started until you get the agreement or the money. Well, I wish our nonprofit, but we care. We want to get the work moving. So we go ahead and do it. But then if we don't get that contract till September, October, or the funding, we then have got fewer months to deliver on what we've promised. So it's a really, I think pre-pandemic, it was frustrating and it was a crisis. It's a full-on catastrophe at this point because of the workforce shortage. And I think your question is why we need this committee's help. We don't know how many C3 nonprofits are doing business with the state. We don't know what that average time is. We don't know what the average payment. We feel like that data is really important.
Okay, very good. Well, I certainly appreciate your all's work on this issue. I appreciate y'all being here today, testifying on it, shining a little light on it. I know you had House Bill 777 this past session, and I know you're moving forward with a bill this coming session, and hopefully we can see that across the finish line. But yeah, at this point, I see no further questions on this issue. Again, thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, there's no action needed on that last one. I'll entertain, our next meeting is November 14th. The staff will present a report on the Board of Cosmetology inspections and fines, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. No. Thank you, Senator. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think you got through it quicker than they wanted. Yes. I would like to get my surrounding. Yes. I think. Yes, you do want, okay. Right. You'll be the supervisor.
I have the freedom to say, we can agree to this, and y'all stand here and say, okay, we can agree to explanation why.
Yeah, I think that's the proper way.
This provides a strong framework to start with.
Framework's good. The framework, but just say.
Right, that's the ultimate.
Because then we can all, guess what?
Let's agree to the terms. A lot of this stuff, mortgage is important, but this is like literally life and death services. Yeah, exactly.
In your case, if you don't know, you get it,
Yeah, but
trying to build a task force and you can't get
Well, and you talk about, you want to, if it's, get your return on investment, but all these problems get that, for the state's ability to get that return on investment. Yeah.
You all get a lot deeper in the weeds.
No, I love it. You're back there.